The rain falls heavily outside, the unmistakable sound of drops hitting the window creating a sense of being in a safe, comfortable place. Yet, at the same time, that sound carries something strange and unsettling. What if what we consider safe, what we see every day, could conceal something we don't understand? A familiar place, like our home, our workplace, or even the park we visit every weekend, can transform into a stage for the inexplicable. The fear of something unseen but unmistakably present, lurking in the shadows, is a universal human feeling. The city, with its constant noise and impersonal crowds, becomes a space where the fear of the unknown can manifest in unexpected ways. Today, we'll explore how the supernatural can intertwine with urban environments and how fear can arise from places we consider familiar and safe. Let's walk the streets, step inside old and modern buildings, and confront stories that challenge our perception of reality. Get ready to face the voices in the rain, because the city has more to reveal than you might imagine. Now imagine an old building, solidly built, with walls that hold more than just the weight of time. Within its cold and dark structure, every hallway seems to have a story. Every staircase hides secrets. To many, this building is just an ordinary space where people go to work or live. But what if this seemingly ordinary place hides something more? Something we cannot see with our eyes, but can feel with our bodies and minds? In one of these old buildings, a young woman finds herself facing a growing sensation that she is no longer alone. She, who had grown used to the building's routines, begins to notice strange sounds, as if something moves in the empty staircases, as if someone is watching her. Fear begins to take shape when she hears a voice that shouldn't be there, a muffled, almost whispered voice coming from one of the staircases. But when she looks, she sees nothing but darkness. Story 1. The building where she lives is over 100 years old, and its hallways are narrow and gloomy. The sound of rain falling on the windows is constant, but that's not what unsettles her. There's something else, something invisible. She tries to ignore it, rationalizing the sounds, but the feeling of being watched won't leave her alone. One afternoon, as she climbs the stairs to her apartment, she hears the voice again. It's not a clear sound, but more of a presence, almost as if someone is trying to communicate with her, but without words. She turns quickly, but the staircase is empty. The sensation is intense, as if she is being followed by something that doesn't belong there. When she reaches her floor, her apartment door is slightly ajar, something she's sure she had closed before leaving. She steps inside, and everything seems normal, but the sense that something is off follows her. Looking out the window, the rain keeps falling, but the city sound seems more distant, muffled. It's as if the building is holding more than just its residents. Something is lurking. Now, picture the city differently, not as a safe place, but as a terrain where fear grows in the shadows of illuminated streets. What the young woman doesn't realize is that the fear she feels isn't unique to her. All of us, in some way, carry a sense of vulnerability deep within, especially in large cities. We are surrounded by crowds yet remain alone, isolated amidst the urban chaos. Fear can arise in the most mundane situations, where the unexpected seems to hide just around the corner. The city, with its towering buildings and dazzling lights, conceals a darker side where the supernatural can emerge. That same day, the young woman starts to reflect on her vulnerability. She begins to understand that the urban environment isn't as safe as it seems. The city is not just a concrete jungle. It's also a place where our deepest emotions can be amplified. Urban fear often manifests in the unknown. It could be the feeling of being watched while walking down an empty street, or hearing an eerie sound at night when everything seems silent. Fear blends with routine, turning familiar places and landmarks into stages for supernatural manifestations. She begins to question whether what she heard was just her imagination or something more. What if every corner, every street, holds a story we're not ready to hear? The fear that the familiar may not be as safe as we think is something many people in big cities experience. After all, if the inexplicable can arise where safety seems guaranteed, where can we truly feel secure? Now, let's move to the second story, which takes place in a completely different setting. An urban park nestled in the middle of the city is a place where people often seek refuge. Amid the chaos of the streets and the noise of the city, the park offers a bit of peace and tranquility. But is that peace genuine? Or does the park also hide something beyond our understanding? Story 2. She was always a calm person, someone who enjoyed being outdoors, especially at the park near her house. There, the sounds of nature mingled with the city, creating a unique atmosphere. But that day, something fell off. The sky was overcast, and the rain began to fall. But she didn't mind. She felt at peace, walking along the trails she knew so well. However, as she went further, something seemed different. The sensation of being watched made her stop. She looked around but saw no one. Still, something bothered her. As the rain intensified, she sought shelter under an old tree. That's when she saw it. A silhouette, not a normal person, but something strange, distorted. She tried not to look, but the sight froze her in place. The silhouette began to move, and she realized she was not alone. Fear gripped her, and she ran, but the figure seemed to get closer with every step. She didn't know what was happening, but knew she couldn't stay there. She ran without looking back, only the sound of the rain and her own footsteps echoing on the wet paths. The park, once a refuge, now felt heavy with a dense, unsettling energy. She knew something was wrong, but couldn't explain it. The figure seemed to close in with every turn she made, as if it knew exactly where she was. Even with the rain pouring down, the park felt eerily quiet. No birds, no rustling leaves, only an oppressive stillness, as though the very environment was holding its breath waiting. Reaching a clearing, she stopped to catch her breath, but the sensation of being watched had only intensified. She looked toward the shadows of the trees and, in a flash of fear, saw the silhouette again, closer this time. She began to scream, but the rain muffled her voice. Yet the scream sounded strange, as if it didn't belong to her at all. Story 3. This story begins on a quiet street at night, with streetlights casting long, deep shadows across the sidewalks. To many, this would be the image of a calm, even comforting night in a city that never sleeps. But for a group of friends, this night would become something entirely different. They had just left a nearby bar and decided to walk home. Their laughter and light-hearted conversation made the journey feel easy, until one of them, the most observant, noticed something. He saw a figure watching them from a window across the street. The window was slightly open, and the figure just stood there motionless. There was no light inside, only the moonlight reflecting off the dirty glass. At first, everyone dismissed it as imagination, a trick of the light. But soon, the feeling of being watched grew stronger. He looked again at the window and saw the figure was no longer there, though a strange shadow had formed on the wall as if the person had moved deeper inside. Fear began to creep into the group, and the walk that should have been quick turned slow and tense. As they moved forward, the silence became deafening. The city, usually alive with sound, had transformed into a deserted landscape. No lights flickered on, no cars passed. It was as if the entire scene had been muted by something invisible. The group quickened their pace, but the shadow seemed to follow, moving along the building walls. With every step, the unease grew. The sensation of being observed intensified, and once familiar streets began to feel like a labyrinth of shadows and uncertainty. Reaching a corner, the group turned back to glance at the window where the figure had stood. No one was there anymore, but the air felt heavy, and they all knew something unexplainable had happened. They never took that route at night again, and the memory of that haunting sense of dread stayed with them. The city, once perceived as a safe and ordinary place, now felt alien, full of mysteries they could never fully understand. Story 4. In a large city where concrete mingles with life and buildings tower over the skyline, there is an old subway station, older than most of the people who use it. Many don't pay attention to it. They simply use it as a means of transportation, never noticing the dirty walls or the iron arches that support the system. But on one rainy night, a woman was returning home after a long day at work. She always took the subway at that hour, but something felt different that day. When she entered the station, she noticed it was empty. Normally, there were at least a few passengers, but at that moment, only the distant sound of rain against the windows and the echo of the train kept her company. Descending the stairs, something caught her attention, a low murmur coming from the platform. She assumed it was just the station's natural echoes, but as she got closer, the sound became clearer. It was voices, but not normal voices. They were distorted, as if from another dimension. She stopped for a moment, hesitant, and looked toward the platform. She glanced at her watch, but time seemed to have stopped. The station was empty, yet the voices echoed louder and louder. They didn't come from a specific direction, but seemed to emanate from all around her. A growing sense of dread washed over her, and suddenly, the voices became clearer, closer. They sounded like pleas, as though someone was begging to be found, but their tone carried a deep despair. Though alone on the platform, she felt an undeniable presence. Every step she took closer to the tracks, the voices intensified. She scanned her surroundings and caught a glimpse of movement in the shadows, a tall, hooded figure that vanished quickly between the tracks. She wanted to run, but her legs didn't respond as they should. Paralyzed by fear, she stood there, trembling. Suddenly, the subway train arrived, its screeching brakes breaking the suffocating silence. She jumped into the carriage, without a backward glance. Even then, the voices lingered, echoing in her mind, as if they had followed her onto the train. Now we move to the final story, set in a seemingly peaceful location, but with an eerie twist. The city, illuminated by countless lights, holds more secrets than it appears to. Story 5. The neighborhood seemed calm, and the cafe was the perfect spot for a casual meeting. Yet the young woman sitting with her friend felt uneasy. It wasn't just the noise of the cafe or the faintly flickering light bulbs overhead. It was the persistent feeling of being watched. She tried to dismiss it, but the sensation only grew stronger. Her friend was absorbed in his phone, oblivious, while she became more aware of an invisible but unmistakable presence. Suddenly, the cafe's alarm went off, startling the patrons. Yet no one moved. The doors remained shut, and the sound faded, as if muffled by the city itself momentarily falling silent. That's when she noticed something chilling. Behind her friend, in the cafe's mirror, she saw a figure standing at the entrance. She whipped around to look directly at the door. Nothing, but the reflection clearly showed a silhouette, still and unmoving. Her heart raced, and for a fleeting moment, fear gripped her entirely. She tried to get her friend's attention, but he remained fixated on his phone, seemingly oblivious to the alarm and her distress. When she looked back at the mirror, the figure was gone, yet the oppressive sensation of being observed persisted. She couldn't shake the feeling that whatever she had seen or thought she'd seen hadn't left. The cafe, once a comforting haven, now felt charged with an ominous energy. Even as they left the establishment and stepped back into the glowing city streets, the memory of the figure in the mirror stayed with her. And in her mind, a lingering thought echoed. Had she truly escaped it? Or was it still watching her from the shadows of the bustling city?